Today's topic is compassion and empathy. And why I chose this is because of in those moments with our kids, when we have those challenging behaviors, one of the best things we can do for us and for them is come from a place with empathy, being empathetic to their struggles and their challenges, and be compassionate for what they are going through as well. Now, that is hard to do if your 3-year-old is throwing a complete temper tantrum in the middle of the mall and you're trying to peel them up. In those moments, it is hard, but what is that child feeling inside that's making them, react in this way? And I feel as a mom, raising 2 kids and repeated challenges and repeated behaviors, and it can really wear down on you sometimes. But when you look at what they are doing as they really want to try their best, and I do believe that. I believe every kid wants to do their best, they just don't know how to. And when you look at that way, when they're doing something, you can say, all right, they don't know how to, they don't have the skills yet. I'm empathetic to where they are now, and I'm compassionate that this will change and they will get help. This will someday end. And I promise you, things now, I don't know what different ages you guys have with the kids, but it's a journey. And when the kids are younger, I promise you a lot of the things that I struggled with early on, they do pass. Kids do get older and they do get over some of the struggles. So have hope with that. So I want to, so reacting in challenging moments, what tools can we use to help us and help our kids? So I want to ask you a question. I want you to think about this. Think of one incident or problem that you have repeatedly with your child, okay? That you could shift how it impacts you, him, or her when you introduce empathy and compassion towards your child. So I want to think of the last moment you had that you just completely lost it, or you just felt, I can't handle this behavior, I can't handle this situation. Think about it. Welcome. What we're doing is I'm posing a question. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Uzair is my son, and actually he is autistic. He's diagnosed with autism. Okay. And other than the rest of the things, sometimes it becomes really very irritable. And because he has a speaking difficulty, it's really very difficult to understand sometimes. I try really hard as much as I can to understand him. I keep asking him, I keep assessing my own self. What could it be? What he wants? What's the thing which is disturbing him? But most of the time, mostly it's helpless. Like I feel helpless. It becomes very irritable and uncontrollable.
So
keeps shouting, screaming, jumping, running, and especially this.
Okay, thank you. And I think probably most people in this room can empathize with you. I know I can. And that is hard. So a couple of things to think about in there. So the first thing is you had mentioned just how he's always acting like this and he feels very uncomfortable and you can tell he's just not able to regulate. And that's so hard for kids with autism because what they feel in certain ways we can't even comprehend. It's I don't know if you're familiar with some of the sensory sensitivities kids with autism have, but many kids with autism, not all, but they tend to have be oversensitive in one area and maybe undersensitive in another area. And when you have that imbalance, and sometimes the sensitivity for auditory, there were studies done with many kids with autism, and they found that their hearing was at the same decibel as dogs hear. That's how sensitive their hearing is. And so we wonder why they're holding their, their ears and they don't like crowded places, right? Because could you imagine if I was talking to you right now and I was in a very loud voice like this, would you want to hear me? You would run, you would escape. So when your child is having some of these behaviors, number one, I don't want you to think I can't deal with this. I'm lost. There's nothing I can do, because that won't help start solving the problem. I did that for many years too. When my kids were doing something, I would focus on the problem and I would feel like I couldn't handle it. And then once I switched and said, you know what, right now I can't, but I know there's an answer and I'm open to that answer. And you will find as you start keeping that door open, and it does, you will find people and specialists that can help you. So one of the things is, let's be empathetic. Let's see, what do you think your son, put yourself in his shoes and see, all right, I understand, he is going crazy. And so those moments, if you don't have sort of a behavioral plan or you know exactly what to do, having that calm space and just compassion for him is one of the best things we can do as parents. Because our energy, that's the other thing with children with autism, they are very sensitive to sounds, sights, things going on in their environment, but they pick up people's energy. If you're in a bad mood, I know my son, he was my barometer for when I was in a bad mood. He would not even come near me. he would stim more, like he was my barometer. And I'm like, oh, okay, calm down. And when we can be in those moments, and it takes work, and I'm not telling you it's easy. It is not easy, but it can be done take those breaths. And we'll talk about the compassion for ourselves in a minute. But when you start to understand kiddos, and there are so many videos, if you go on YouTube and just put in autism sensory processing, the more you understand his sensory system and some of his challenges, the more you can start to look at what in the environment maybe you can help him with. And, I'm assuming he's getting therapy for some of the challenge he has, and rely on those therapists. Does anyone else want to share?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yep, I sure can.
Hi. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm actually a special ed teacher. I've been teaching for 40 years, and I've had autism and you name it. I've had many different students in my class with different disabilities, and I know that it's difficult. I also have 3 children. One was gifted, one was learning disabled, and one was born with a birth defect. So we've had, we've had a big conglomerate of doing and dealing with different things. But I think Elizabeth is absolutely right. And if I have to tell you guys anything, patience, patience, patience. You have to be uber patient. So now my granddaughter was just diagnosed with autism, and I wasn't getting it, even though I had done it for years. I wasn't getting it. I was like, I don't understand why when I talk to her, she doesn't understand what I'm saying. You just said, again, the sensitivity to sound. So we were at a birthday party. It was actually a baby shower. And one of the other little grandchildren was hitting these balloons. And I kept telling the other one to stop, please stop. And then finally, my other granddaughter said, shut up, just shut up. She was so bad that she kept doing that. And her mother, like, almost killed her. And I was like, stop. And I took them both aside and I said, why did you say that? And we talked about it. She just really did not know how else to make her stop. She was driving her crazy. And she didn't know what else to say. So when she said that, she did stop. But I think that sometimes we misunderstand really what they're saying. And you just have to give them a minute. And sometimes they can tell you, give them, give them the opportunity. We're always running around, we're always busy. And we're bad at that. I know I'm bad at that. Even in my classroom, I was bad at that. I had to like say, I had to give this student wait time. And all the kids would be raising their hand. They wanted to give me the answer. I said, well, we're going to let so-and-so take a minute and we're going to see if they can think of the answer. And eventually they would think of the answer. So what do you suggest for something like that? Is that the right way to handle that? Should I do something different?
So you're asking the right way to handle with
her saying something outlandish, but not, she didn't really mean what she didn't want her to stop.
Okay.
But, with her sensory, her language, her hearing sensory, I mean, she did qualify for language therapy. What else can be done for her to assist her?
What I would suggest, and this I'm going to actually share. I just have a couple shots that I like to share with you that will go along with the question that you just asked. So this is my little guy, and when he was younger, and he always wanted to be in everyone's shoes. He was always trying to get in everyone's shoes and walking around. And so how I help, like, especially with siblings, because it is challenging. I mean, I have two kids, my kids with the siblings, and I'm just gonna ask to mute if you aren't muted. There we go. And so I always say my one complains about the other because the other one does things that he doesn't understand and he feels he shouldn't be doing them. And so I always say, put yourself in his shoes. And I always try to share with them the other side. So maybe you could do that with a sister. And like I just did when I spoke very loudly, helping the sister to understand that she is very sensitive to sound and that we understand you want her to stop, but shouting is actually going to make her more stressed and so giving her another way of doing it, saying maybe next time come over and whisper in her ear, because then she'd be like, oh, this is something different. Why are you whispering in my ear? Do you see? And maybe that will really get her attention, because why would she whisper in my ear? So, trying something like that that's different, but also meets her sensory needs is a good way to start.
And do you think language therapy is good for her?
Oh, yeah, language therapy is definitely good to help with that as well. And that's, I'm going to give you suggestions, but therapy too, these are little tidbits, but a lot of issues do, would be better served with comprehensive different approaches, but these are some little tidbits you can do.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, before I go to the next one, I'm just going to go through this real quickly. So we're talking about compassion. I really think compassion is extremely important. This is why I'm really, really passionate about this talk. So love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Okay, we want to be happy and we want our kids to be happy, right? So it's very important to practice that compassion. And this is Dalai Lama said this. Self-compassion. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about us and then we'll come back to the kids too. So having compassion towards us. Kristen Neff is a researcher and she's also a parent of a child with autism, and she really, really put a movement forward with that self-compassion for parents. And, with what she was sharing is to really stop judging ourselves, because I guarantee you, if you guys write down everything you say to yourself during the day and you look at those words, I guarantee you a lot of that you're going to find really harshly judging yourself for what you did or didn't do or don't know. It is not helping anyone, especially you and your kids, when we do this. And I did this, so I fully know, it is amazing what I would tell myself. So if you can start to notice those words and be compassionate in those moments and say, I don't know how to handle this now, but I will find a way somehow. I will find an answer. Or if my child at some point will stop this, it won't last forever. Be supportive and sympathetic towards yourself when noticing personal shortcomings. Engage in internal dialogue that is caring, not critical. So, so important. And we want our kids to do this as well. I love this little girl because her face just shows, Michelle knows this face, you can tell she just did something and she probably got in trouble. She's like, I shouldn't do that. But you know what? This girl, after she does it, she's going to forget about it and she's going to run and play. But when we make mistakes, do we think, you know what, this happened? Is there a lesson I can learn from it so it doesn't happen again and then move on? Or do we continue to think about it and relive it over and over again? I know I tended to do that a lot. So remember, we're all human. Everyone makes mistakes. Perfection is impossible, okay? I think parents, especially when we have kids with special needs, we feel like we need to do everything. And from a therapist, one more, comparison is and will be the thief of joy. So do not compare yourself to other people. Very, very, very important. When you can stop and say, I'm doing the best I can, and I will be learning as this journey goes, it is such a better place to come from because you're giving compassion for yourself where you are. So in those hard moments, it's important to give your child that compassion because them feeling like they need a safe space when they're in feeling overwhelmed and they're having a tantrum. And if and I've been there, I've shouted right back. I have, what I am saying is advice. And I come from this place more and more as the journey, and I learn this and I practice this. But if you can come in those times and just take a minute and just hold your chest, take a deep breath, and just like, it will pass. And just give yourself a moment of just, this sucks. Be honest with yourself. Don't say it should be different. I wish it was different because right now, you know what, it is what it is. So when we can say, this really sucks. I really wish I wasn't having to handle this right now, but it will end. And then take that breath and then approach your child. But when we come at our child, when they're having some of these meltdowns and behaviors with I wish they weren't doing this. I don't know how to handle this. This is so frustrating. It's not going to help the situation. And so that's really important to start seeing what we're saying in our minds and how we're treating ourselves in those moments, as well as our kids. My kiddos, I found when especially my little guy, he is very intense with his emotions, to the point where if he didn't get his way, he would bang his head multiple times. And so when he was younger, when he didn't get his way, I had to run over and make sure I grabbed him before he would start banging his head because he wasn't happy with the outcome. And having those intense moments, I found when, for me, we started to work on those calming things, but also ways to get out those extreme moments. And so when he saw me breathe, and I started to do that and taught him to do it, when we had those moments together and he saw me go like this and breathe, he started to do it as well. And now he actually transferred that into school. When he's having an emotional, he's in 5th grade now. But when he's having these moments when things are just getting overwhelming, he starts to take that moment and breathe and have compassion towards himself and acknowledge his emotion, because we can't not acknowledge our emotions. They're there for a reason. We acknowledge our emotions. And then it was much better for him to move on or go take a break. Otherwise, it's mounting and mounting and mounting. I noticed some of these kids, you know, they're trying to hold it together in school, and it's really hard for them holding it together all day. And so a lot of times when they come home, they're going to flip out because they've been just trying to keep it together. And so I think we have to remember that too. And so that's really like having compassion and empathy and understanding what's going on with our kids. It can be challenging sometimes. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I had the knowledge before I had kids what some of their challenges were. And even in those moments, I'm like, why? What's going on? What do you need? Why can't I, why are you doing this? We automatically go to that instead of stepping back and looking at it with more an observer eye. You would probably find the answers a little bit more. Something to think about. Does anyone have another example that they'd like to share?
Our son is 14 years old and has recently been diagnosed with ADHD.
Mhm.
So at the moment, we are struggling pretty hard with him answering back. One of the things as well is he goes into these moments where you're trying to have a conversation with him and he just doesn't listen. And it's just this it's aggressiveness and answering back, and to the point where it's the same kind of, if he doesn't get what he wants, he'll go into this mode where he just pushes things, drops things, pushes you. And I mean, he's getting bigger. He's 14 at the moment. And myself and my husband are really struggling with him understanding now. At the moment, we're both learning about this diagnosis as well. So we're finding it really hard to stop, like you said, when do we stop? When do we listen? When there's a consequence and when there's not, like all of that. If you have any either books, any quick, even tools for us as parents to be able to stop ourselves and allow for him to let it out maybe, but we're struggling a lot with when do we have to give him a consequence? When do we just stop and all of those? Is there anything else you want to add, Jamie?
You said it well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said it well.
Okay.
Now, disclaimer. I'm giving a snapshot and I'm giving you some tips to do. But if you feel, that more is needed, definitely pursue. But these are some things that I found to help. Is your child, so I know you speak English. Does your child speak English as well?
He does. And now I'm, of course, my mother tongue is in Spanish. So he does a lot. He's been doing a lot of he nearly laughs at my accent and stuff like that. So yeah, but we do speak English. Like our conversations are always in English. Yeah.
Okay. Just because there's a great on YouTube, it's called Wellcast, and I recommend that for teens.
Okay.
WELL Cast, and they do videos on how to manage strong emotions, and it's a cartoon. And they cover puberty, they cover topics of both dating for older people, but I'd say it's more for the teens. And sometimes information coming from outside, we mean well, but kids don't always listen to us as easily as they would listen to something outside. So I would definitely suggest that. Consequences. Have you ever, the anger is coming from somewhere, right? And so there's a lot of reasons why he could feel these strong emotions, biological and just emotional. So that there are, it could come from two different places. But what I always try to do with my kiddos is when they have those strong emotions and when they react the way they do, in that moment, I try to be calm and I really try to say, explain to them, calm down. You need to, this is not helping. But afterwards, I never do consequences in teaching in the moment because it just doesn't work. When they are in that level of emotion, think of when you're mad and someone tells you how to handle the situation. If you're mad at someone and yelling at them and someone says, this is how you should handle the situation, are you going to listen to them?
No, you defensive probably. You get defensive and yeah.
Yeah. So maybe later, talk to your son, say, hey, we don't want you to, and it's called Flipping the Lid. And that's another resource is Dan Siegel. He has written many books, and you could even look on YouTube. He's done some TED Talks, and he has some great videos. And the one called Flipping the Lid, and it really helps you to understand, these kids, when they have these strong emotions, and especially kids, emotional regulation does not fully occur till you're 21 years of age. So, their ability to regulate, remember, they're still working on that, okay? But I like his example of the brain. And so this is the brain, okay? Down here, you have the brainstem, and you have the limbic system, the emotional gateway, the amygdala, and up here, you have the frontal lobe. Well, when you get upset and you flip your lid, okay, and that's an example, your ability to access that frontal lobe and calm yourself down and make a good decision in that moment, it's not happening, okay? And so I think if you pursue some of the videos from Dan Siegel, you'll really get a deep insight into the teenage brain, because he does a lot on the teenage brain, which is really, really good. And then consequences. I believe in natural consequences. And talk to your son, like, look, what would you do if I yelled at you like that? Let him understand at another time, the different sides of it, and let him know, look, if you flip out on someone else, they may punch you, in high school, like, you have to be able to have control of your emotions. And so Dan Siegel, once you watch his work and some of the videos he has, maybe share with your son. Because I think if your son, I have a teen group that will be starting in March, and it is about those skills, those life skills. And we talk about emotional intelligence, because God, I wish I had some of those tools when I was younger. And, you can look up emotional intelligence as well. And those are great programs to really help your son start to acknowledge his emotions and acknowledge what's going on. Because the more we understand or are aware of our emotions, then we can start to manage them better. I hope that helped.
Thank you so much. Yes.
You're welcome. So I'm looking in the chat box, and let's see, I have another question. So my son, now 18, has autism, ADHD, anxiety disorder. I don't know what kid doesn't have anxiety and autism together. I think that's a pair, and more. I never found consequences to be helpful, especially when he was younger. Yeah. Recently, natural consequences, example, once you spend your allowance, it's gone until you earn more, are effective. Very good, yeah. But consequences in the form of punishment have only ever one effect: to further undermine his already challenged self-esteem. Thank you, Michelle. That I agree with that. And I've seen that with my kids as well. Punishment, they don't want to do these things. They really, like I said, I feel every kid really, if they had a choice in the moment, they would make the right decision, but they don't always have the tools to do it. And so helping them with, learning the tools, and then also learning about those consequences. And I like that, natural consequences. And we all learn by doing, right? and by experience. And experience really does teach us. So thank you.
Elizabeth, if you don't mind my jumping in here for just a second, two things. One is, in the chat, there have actually been a lot of people who've been asking if you're going to send out the slides and the links that you mentioned for this session and the recording for this session to all of us. But the other thing is I actually wasn't going to address this until you read it to the whole group, but I just wanted to add, I think one of the challenges I know certainly I have faced as the mother of a special needs kid is we live in a society, and it's not just the United States, this is global, I think. We live in societies where there's a lot of peer pressure that expects that if a child is misbehaving, then that is because we as the parents are mistaken, doing something wrong, we're too liberal and permissive, we are failing to impose appropriate consequences. I find that kind of attitude to be very biased, very uninformed, and very damaging to people in our community. It has taken me a lot of work to gain enough self-confidence that I can resist that kind of attitude. But I think that that's part of what we're struggling with, is that there's this expectation that if our child is having a meltdown, it's because we're not doing the things that we ought to be doing as parents. And that is just plain wrong.
Thank you, because you are just plain right. It is really challenging, because that is another thing that I address in different workshops, is that guilt. And guilt, that guilt we hold because of some of our kids' challenges. We sometimes think it's our fault, and it doesn't help anyone. And I understand about that perception of what are they thinking of me in the moment, and that comes into that non-judgment. Like, if we can get to that point, and I have gotten to that point where I don't care, my kid's having an outbreak, so you know what? And one of the girls in the last meeting had shared her story when her son was having that meltdown, and she was like, all right, and she just let him have it and let it out. And then when he was done, they walked away. And there's only so much you can do in that situation. But that judgment is, and I think society has a problem with judgment. And that's why, if it starts with us, we can't control other people, but it starts with us. So if we can start practicing that non-judgment to ourselves and to others, and say, oh, that sucks, but it's okay, man, that's life. And then we can just be more accepting. I agree with that. In that, having a kid with special needs is hard. I have two. And in schools, you know how bad I felt? I felt everyone should figure I could cure my kids because I'm a therapist, I'm a specialist, And when my kids would have problems, I would always come with trying to solve it and trying to be that expert. And because I felt like I should be the one to fix them. And when I learned that, no, I can't do it all. I can't be the mom. I can't be the therapist. I can't be the psychologist. I can't be the nurse. I can't be. And when I just stepped back and owned that mom role, and I allowed other people to take on some of the other roles to help my kids, that freed me up to be there more with my kid. So yeah, no, and that's a great point. So I hope everyone remembers that non-judgment piece, because who cares anymore? I've gotten to the point where I don't care. People are going to believe what they believe and think what they think. And that's, what are you going to do? Anyone else? And so I will share the recording. As long as if you signed up with Eventbrite, or if you signed up through the website, I will go ahead and send the recording. Can anyone else have a scenario they want to share, or a challenge? Or
may I say something, Elizabeth? I think just on this notion of, when our kids' behavior, not to make it about something that we've done wrong, or, to feel guilty. I think that's super important. At the same time, though, I think we have to mediate that feeling of not feeling guilty and, giving ourselves slack and self-compassion with recognizing that there are times that we do things that trigger them, and that it's important for us to be aware of that. And I'll give an example of that. So my oldest, a few weeks ago, I had asked her she had made some food and the counter was messy, and I asked her to clean it up. And my husband stepped in and said, yeah, Kian, like, mom's asked you 3 times now to do that. And she just went into a full-blown, like, crying and, very upset. And I said, what's going on? And she says, when you guys do that, I hear it as criticism and it hurts my feelings. And it also reminds me of what the kids at school do. One of them will say, Kian, don't do that. You're disturbing us. And then another kid will be like, yeah, Kian. And she says, so when mommy, you tell me to do something, and then daddy says, yeah, Kian, we had no awareness that that was something that was so hurtful and triggering to her. So it's not that we failed as parents or whatever. We hadn't, and she made a good point. Like, I'm on top of this, like, Mike, you don't need to jump in, step back. And so we both apologized. And afterwards, Mike and I, agreed that when one of us is dealing with an issue, the other parent doesn't need to step in and reinforce, like, I've got this. And we really praised Kian for having, even though she was crying and very upset and raised her voice at us, to be able to have that capacity to say, this is why I'm upset. When you say that, this is how I'm hearing it. And I think we have to be sensitized to, no matter how loving we are with our children, they, as neurodivergent individuals, live in a world which is not very kind to them. So even when I speak in a firm tone, she hears me as yelling, and I'm not yelling. Like, Elizabeth knows me, I'm not a yeller. But if I firm my voice to her ADHD sensory processing ears, it sounds like I'm yelling. And so, or if I say, can you please, like, clean up the counter or whatever, depending on the tone, she hears that as criticism. And so we've had to readjust how we talk, like, and I speak in a more flat tone now when I ask requests, because I find when there's no tone in my voice, it's just like this, they receive it better. They don't hear the things that they perceive or interpret as criticism, or, they've said things to, like, she's my most communicative child. And, she'll say, like, when you say that, it makes me feel like you don't love me anymore. And I'm like, what? Like, how do you get from what I've said to that crazy notion? But she's helped me to understand. So I think it's really tough. It makes, of course, parenting so much harder. But it's about mediating the, when they flip out, it's rooted in their own challenges, but that maybe there's things we can adjust as well to make it easier.
Thank you, Chesnak. You made so many good points there. The one of the importance of our kids being able to voice how they feel and being comfortable doing that is so wonderful, and having that self-awareness. And two, sometimes the things we do that think are so minor, our kids, to them, it's a huge, huge issue. And, or, emotionally, she took that so to heart, and we would never realize that. And if she didn't speak up about it, it would continue to happen, right? And that's that dialogue with our kids, if we can. If our kids are at that capacity where we can talk with them, like you said, doing things that trigger. And we all do it. I do it. I mean, it's automatic. I mean, there are things that it just happens. And sometimes we don't even realize it. But when that happens and you see her have a meltdown, and you knew what to do, you lowered your voice and you changed your approach, but you could also ask too, your child, like, how can I get your attention in those moments? Because she said at school too, this is happening where the kids are saying stuff and she's not hearing because of her challenges with focusing. And so maybe you could go over and you could, next time when she has to do that, what I always do when my kids are having trouble focusing and I want them to do something and I've repeated it, sometimes I go over and I just touch her on the shoulder and say, could you please, in a nice way, just could you please pick up your dish? And that's, looking at them in the eye, touching them, engaging them so they're hearing me, because otherwise, if I'm saying it on this side of the room and they're doing something on this side of the room, like my message is not going to probably get there. So that's something too. And talk to them, like, what can I do? I love that approach, because by asking them what you could do different, they're voicing their needs, and you're getting it from the source, and they're learning how to solve problems. So that's another thing to consider, if possible.
I have one other tip, if I may,
Okay.
if there's no one more. So just to provide context, our younger 3 children were adopted through foster care, and we had to learn that children who've experienced trauma and loss cannot be parented in the typical way, that we have to use therapeutic parenting techniques. So we've had to learn and implement the therapeutic parenting techniques. But what I have found is that using those therapeutic techniques with our oldest, who we adopted at birth, so she doesn't have the same level of trauma and loss, but any adoption involves trauma and loss. All that to say that more and more I'm understanding that our children who are neurodiverse are traumatized by their life experience outside of our home. Like, we just moved our oldest to a private school, and one of my friends who taught there for a year mentioned how it struck her, going from the public school system to this private school, how traumatized the children were by public school, where they were made to feel, dumb and, problem behavior and so on and so forth. So if I could advise people to look up, for example, the works of Dan Hughes, Karen Purvis, Gord Neufeld, and others like them who take that therapeutic approach to parenting and implement that might be really, you might notice that really useful.
Thank you, Chisholm. Can you type the names in the chat box?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That emotional piece is so important. That's why the compassion and empathy is so important, because these kids, neurodiverse children, and I grew up with one of them, so I get it. It is challenging. It is not easy.
I wanted to say something that I'm kind of new to this, because we are just realizing my son is actually a high sensitivity child, an HSC. So as one of the people mentioned earlier, gifted. And along with his sensitivities, because we are in COVID and having to get used to this new virtual environment, we're realizing that the whole school on a screen, again, high sensitive to noise and visual stimulation, we're having to adjust his school schedule just so that he's not overwhelmed. And I do appreciate what Chesmac said about lowering the tone and doing the touch thing. That has definitely worked. We've only done that in like the last week, and he doesn't get overwhelmed, and he does say the same things, like when we raise our voice, he feels like, we don't care about him as much because it's so overwhelming. But my question is, how do we deal with, say we have the high sensitivity child and the non-sensitivity child, and like this one is loud, rambunctious, and always wants to kind of like be energetic, and it's hard to separate in the house, obviously doing virtual school. Do you have any tips to dealing with that?
Okay. what I would say, and I get burned out from being on the electronics all day. I mean, it is challenging. And thank you guys, there's some great recommendations in the chat box as well. One of the things I know for me, I have a balancing board for some of my kids that especially, so for the one that's moving around has a lot of energy, standing up may help. So having an opportunity to have, if they can, stand up for a little bit. I don't know if he's working on a laptop or if it's a PC. But I have a balance board, and so I'll stand up and I'll balance on it. And that way he's sort of getting that movement, but he's still able to focus. And believe it or not, science backs this up. Kids learn better when they're moving. People learn better when they're moving. So, I mean, our schools, we're supposed to sit, but honestly, the brain comprehends and processes information better when you are in movement, or you use movement to learn something. So I would definitely suggest that. Your other son who's sensitive, I like how you're doing those breaks. I think that is great to do, and teach him some of those techniques. There are some great calming techniques, just the breathing. Teach him in between classes to do that. And when I say breathe, I mean, there are courses that are 6 months long just on breathing. Like, breathing is something that really regulates our emotions and how we feel. And I would say 95% of the kids I worked with are shallow breathers because they're always in that state of stress. And when you take deep breaths, you actually calm down the nervous system, and what helps you regulate. I love the breathing exercises. They really are very helpful. So maybe go ahead and practice some of those. I can send you, if you want me to, I can send you some of the breathing exercises that I do. And you can even look, I hate to say YouTube on everything, but there are, if you just put breathing exercises YouTube, you're gonna find a wealth of them. But I do, it's a program called Heart Math, and it also has science backed with kids with autism as well, using this method. And it's where you hold your heart and you just take 3 deep breaths, like a breath in for 3 seconds and a breath out for 3 seconds. And you just keep doing that. And as you practice, you can make that length longer. And hold your hand on the heart, because that is also a key, because kids, if you notice, if you push your hand right here on your chest, does it feel calming to you? I don't know if you know, I've ever heard of, oh my God, why am I blank? She's a very famous person with autism. Oh my God. She invented this machine for cattle to like make cattle calm. Thank you. I mean, I know her. Yeah, thank you. Temple Grandin. When she went to college, she was so overwhelmed. She created this machine that would squeeze her and help her to settle. And so it's a natural response. When you feel pressure here, like a hug, right? You feel calmer. And so that if you can just have him press here while he's breathing, that will really help to calm the nervous system. So, because you want to give him those ways to regulate too, right? You're adjusting the schedule for him too, but then giving him the tools to regulate throughout and take those breaks is helpful too. And the sensitivities, I find those kids that are very sensitive, hard work helps. So I don't know how old he is or if he even likes exercises, but sometimes we do like wall push-ups in between. Like we do stuff to kind of release pent up energy that's built up, especially with now, because these kids aren't going outside, they aren't moving. So there's Go Noodle is a good program that gets kids moving. My kids love to Go Noodle. So that's something you can do in between breaks to get them to move and move about. So did that help?
Yes. And then one last mention is one thing we did notice that is helping, and I don't know if this will help Talia, but is just telling him like, hey, we understand you're feeling X. And so, you know, how can we help you? Or even just saying, do you need a hug? Because a lot of times, well, he's 8, so he doesn't have all the words to express his emotions. But as we mention them, he's sort of picking up on them. And then we did notice that slowing down and not giving the consequence at that time because of the overwhelm in the moment really helps. So just kind of coming down to his level and saying, we know you're frustrated and it's a really tough time. It's been a really rough year. So, you know, we're trying to do the best we can to help you. And that really, like, he'll actually start breaking down into tears, and then we can kind of hug on it. And, you know, I don't know if that can carry on into the teen years, but it has helped in the last 2 weeks.
You know,
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks.
yeah, when he realizes she gets me, I mean, when you're upset and someone says, I get how you're feeling, you're like, thank you. Because a lot of behaviors are a way of expressing how they feel, and they just want you to acknowledge. That's why sometimes behaviors get more and more, because if we don't acknowledge them, they're going to keep expounding upon. No, that's a great, and you brought back that empathy, you know, being empathetic and saying back how he feels, and we understand, and not dealing with another thing by giving him a consequence at that moment. Thank you, Carolyn, for sharing. That was really helpful. Talia, did you have something? I saw you unmuted, or?
No, it's okay. I think maybe a little by little, you know, as we continue to join these, is another thing as well, and probably it happens to a lot of us, is just getting your partner on getting your partner to align with you, you know, and that's kind of a bit of what we're doing at the moment, myself and my husband, because we are very, very different. And I'm a lot more of a hugger. He's a lot more of a consequence, you know, kind of, you know, a lot more strict. And we're trying to find that middle ground for, you know, education and how to parent together as well. So I know that hopefully Elizabeth at some stage, you know, kind of how to do that together as well, because for me, I can just hug my son and say, breathe in, breathe out. But then my husband might be a little bit more kind of on demand, and I'm telling you and I'm asking you, and kind of that aligning and front line, you know, presenting a front line.
That is a great point. And it's 2 different styles of parenting. I mean, we come from different backgrounds, and it can be very challenging because it's 2 different views. I never tell my husband what to do, but I say, you know what, I've found when I do it this way, he tends to respond better. So and then he can decide if he's going to do that approach or not. I have taken 3 different parenting classes, not because I'm obsessed about being a perfect parent, but one was before I had kids. I was having trouble in therapy because I was having these behaviors, and I couldn't do my therapy because of the kids' behaviors. Another one was just aligning with the school's discipline methods. It was called conscious discipline, and I wanted to use the same methods at home as they were at school. I'll send you in the email with the link of the videos or of the audio. The friend of mine who actually did do the parenting courses, she does have some videos that she made to help parents in the time of COVID. So I will also send you that link as well, and maybe some other good resources for that. Okay, well, I know
I had one more resource to share, if that's okay.
All right.
There's an app I found called Ninja Focus. I put it in the chat. I cannot tell you guys how awesome it is. Okay. Like, I've created a little corner in our dining room, and I've put like one of those IKEA little like bookshelves. And then there's like a thing with some fidget toys. There's a stuffy. There's some, not slime, the other thing that they squeeze. There's some joke books, stuff like that. And if they're having a difficult moment, I just say to them, like, would you like to go and sit in your calm down space, and I can give you Ninja Focus. And because it's on a phone, they like it because we hardly give them screen time. So they're like, oh, I'll have a screen. And I'll just pull up Ninja Focus and they can tap on their mood. So if they're angry or stressed out or bored or whatever, they just tap on it and then it gives them options. And those meditations and mindfulness things are beautiful. There's some of them are super short, like just 2 minutes, some are like 4 minutes. And actually, sometimes I'll even sit down and do it with them. And then there's nighttime stories that are amazing. They fall asleep really fast. And like if I, if they need a reminder about something, like if I need to remind them to be kind, there's one called Backpack of Kindness, which is amazing. There's one, if they speak before thinking, there's one that's about the 3 gates. So you have to ask yourself, is what I'm about to say true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? So those are like the 3 gates. And I've really found they gravitate towards it. They can have a profile and they earn points and trophies for doing the different things. And actually I use it myself too. I just love them so much. And it's on half price right now. I was using it as a free resource, but I decided to pay because it was half price. And there's stuff on there for parents. There's things on there for pandemic stress. There's like affirmations. There's breathing techniques. I can't say enough about how great it is. So look that up and see if it's something that might help.
Thank you, Chesmac. I think that, and I love that you were using it too, and I think that's so helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I know for so long I was just trying to help my kids calm and feel better, and I realized I have to do the same because we're both, it's not helpful if they're just calming and I'm not. So thank you. Great resource. Well, you guys were wonderful, and thank you for sharing all of the different resources and ideas and stories and tips. And it's been wonderful meeting all of you. I put in the chat box a link for the compassion resource from Kristen Neff. I think that's a great resource. And if you do want to come to the monthly class, if you want to just click on that and register, that way you just automatically get an email. You don't have to go, if you did through Eventbrite, you don't have to keep re-registering. So you'll just get a reminder. And if you can join, you can come and join the conversation. And if anyone can, I do this for you guys, like I want to help you. So if there is something that you would like me to touch upon, or if you have any suggestions, please let me know in the chat box. You can do it for everyone or just for me, just because, like I said, I want this to be fluid, but also on a specific area. And I want opportunities for everyone to share. But if you have anything that you really want to touch upon, let me know, or that you could recommend that I could do to better help you guys. All right. So if that is all.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And
Elizabeth, so this link that you gave us for the second Monday of every month, so we have to register every time, or
no. If you've already registered through that link, you're good. You will, for the next 12 months, you will automatically get notice when it comes up. So you just have to register once. Yeah.
Okay.
That didn't do that path, because this is also through Eventbrite. The link is there.
Right. Okay. And can we share this information with other people, or do you like keeping it to the same group?
I'm doing this for people that want to come and want to join. So please go ahead and share it. If you think of someone that could benefit from joining, please. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. And nice to see all of you today. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Guys, thank you.
Elizabeth.
All right. You have a wonderful week. Be compassionate, empathetic to yourselves, your kids, and you're doing awesome. I know you probably don't tell yourself that, so remember
So
that.
kind. You're so lovely and so resourceful. Thank you, love.
You're welcome. You guys have a good week.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.